Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Painting with Victor Rigoli. I'm your host, Victor Rigoli. Hi everybody. A little bit off the camera here. I'm kind of a little bit over to the left here. But anyway, I wanted to try something today. This is a painting that I started working on a week or so ago. You can see I've got an imprematura down already. I painted in some sky and some marsh color and some watercolor. Um, but I previously did this imprimatur in a transparent red oxide, and I got my shapes in, and it turned out pretty good, I think. And got some shapes like the grass and stuff like that, and got some darks in, lights in, and stuff. You can see some darks over in here where the water line is, and this is the water that I've got started here. And there's going to be reflection down in here from the grasses and everything. This is going to be kind of a greenish color or some dark colors. And I've even gotten some of the dark color in already here, as well as over here a little bit. It was a kind of a burnt umber and a little bit of maybe some dark green or something down in here. But then this other part up here was a little bit of a burnt sienna with maybe a little bit of a alizarin crimson that I put in here because it's um, the base of the marsh spartina that's in this particular marsh area. This is just a practice painting that I'm working on. It's not anything I'm going to sell or anything like that. It's just something I saw this picture of another artist that does a lot of painting in the coast of Georgia, and I really like their style. And so I'm trying to look at how I can improve my style. And I recommend doing this. I mean, there's no harm in it. I mean, if you're not going to, it's not something that you want to sell, it's just a practice painting, is to copy somebody else's painting. I mean, you can copy some Van Gogh paintings, and you can do some Claude Monets and stuff like that. And I've done a couple Claude Monet paintings. They're like 16 by 20 or 18 by 24. And I've got them hanging up in my home. And it's just something for me. But it was a great exercise that I went through, and I learned a lot from it. And I just recommend that people do that. It's a great, it's a great, um, learning opportunity. Actually, I think you might be able to see me. I've got another little camera kind of on the screen there that I forgot that I had that set up. But anyway, um, just experimenting a little bit here with some of the camera setup. But anyway, I'm going to paint a little bit on this today. There's I've got this blue sky in, and it's just plain. I can't remember what color I used to get this in. I might have used a little bit of ultramarine blue and maybe some cobalt or maybe some cerulean blue, probably a little bit more cerulean here and some lighter colors down in here. A little bit of the imprimatura is coming through. It kind of warms this up here in this horizon area, which is nice. It kind of almost, and from what I can see, gives it a little pinkish kind of tint to it. There are some pink colored clouds in the sky from the photo reference, but you don't always have to paint to the photo. It's your painting. You can do however you want to do it, and paint however you want to paint it. Make sure your color is in harmony and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, so I've got my palette set up down here. This is a palette that I built some time ago. This is a piece of glass that's 18 by 24, and it's got a lot of scratches on it, and it's starting to get a little bit difficult to clean thoroughly. Although I will take some kitchen cleaner. It's got a little Clorox kitchen cleaner. It's got a little bleach in it, and I'll get all the paint off and I'll spray that down, and it really helps clean the palette real well. And then I use some Windex material that I spray on here and clean it up real good and everything. So I always try to have a clean palette when I start. Now this painting that I've got out here on my palette today, I don't know that I'm going to use it all. It is some that was left over from a previous painting session. I start over here on this side, and you may not be able to see it, but I've got in this corner over here, I've got the whites, and I've got some yellows, and then I move up to the upper left-hand corner over here. I've got my reds, and then I start with some browns up at the top, and I got some green, and then my blues and black, and then over here to this side over here, I usually have um, just leftover paint, something I was working on. It might be a sky color, it might be a grass color or whatever. It's just leftover paint. That's something I might be able to use, in another painting session. So I try not to waste oil paint. I will put it on a little palette um, and just stick it in the refrigerator. I've got like a little mini fridge up here in the studio, which comes in handy. And I'll put that in the freezer section of it. And I may pull the paint out a day or two later, and it's still pretty fresh, and I can reuse it. But yeah, that's a little bit about that. And try to adjust this camera just a little bit, maybe. There we go. So you can see over here in this corner a little bit. So that's where my whites are, and I just go all the way around my palette, and I've got all this area in here for workspace and that kind of thing. So yeah, so looking at my reference photo, and unfortunately I don't have that on there. Although let me take this other camera. I'm just experimenting, so bear with me, folks. Taking this little extra camera that I had here, and I'm just going to try to zoom in a little bit. This is, and hopefully this is being recorded and picking it up. But there in that little bitty picture, I don't know if you can see it, is a photo reference, okay, and that's what I'm going to be painting from. And so I'm just going to set this bad boy back over here, kind of get it out of the way. If it shows me, hey, that's great. If not, no loss, because I know you guys really don't want to see my ugly mug. But there we go. All right. So anyway, it's on me, I guess. Um, but the main thing is getting the camera on this particular shot here so you can see me actual painting, and also what I'm mixing down here below. And I'll try to talk a little bit about that. I apologize for this glare that's down here. I've got overhead lights here in the studio, and I apologize if that's causing some issues with some of you. I'll have to get some soft lights and try to work on that in future videos that I may do. All right. So anyway, I had applied this color in here, and this color in here is kind of it's a combination of things. It's a little bit of yellow ochre with a little bit of burnt siennas in there. There's probably a little bit of raw sienna in there, maybe a little bit of white, titanium white in there, and everything. And it's okay, but I'm not sure that I'm happy with that color. I may just leave it. I think from my photo reference, the color that I'm seeing just looking over to my right over here, the photo reference is, there's more yellow in it. This looks more red and orangey color compared to my photo reference. So what I'm going to do today, I think, is I'm just going to maybe um, work on. I think I'll work on the sky. Okay, I'll work on the sky a little bit, and I may come in here and work a little bit on the grass in here because this is darker. It's a green, a shade of green, and some dark shade. And I tried to put in some shapes over here, some darker shapes, and some muted color greens, some dark greens, and I mixed a combination of sap green and some violet, and mixed that in and gave me kind of a real dark green color there. Um, and then this probably was a mixture of maybe some cobalt and yellow, not cobalt, but some ultramarine blue and some yellow ochre and things like that. To just kind of get some greens going there, some darker greens according to my reference photo. And so you've got here in the grass, and I'll just talk a little bit about this here. There's some green color in through here, okay. And then you start getting, and there's a little bit of greens back in here, so you can tell it kind of dips down. And so I'm gonna have to block that in here where it's dark. And see, the imprimatur is kind of a what you would call a blueprint, so to speak. As an architect, you have um, a blueprint. So he draws up the plans, sketches them out, and I don't know what they use today, but I know 50, 60 years ago, it was actually blue paper, and the way it was printed out and created white lines and had all the little numbers and drawings and measurements and all that kind of stuff for building the structure, and maybe it's a home and that kind of thing. And so when you do an imprimatur, you're kind of doing a blueprint. And you got to have that foundation. It starts with your composition, and that's really the concept. And being an architect, if you could relate it to that, it's kind of like, okay, what do I want to build? Am I building a house? Am I building a garage? What have you? A skyscraper or whatever. But we'll just stick to something simple like a house. So yeah, I've got to have the foundation, and so what's going to be the dimensions? How big is the foundation going to be? And you really can't just start, okay, I'm going to draw out a foundation. As a homeowner, and you go to an architect, you're saying, hey, I want to build a house, and it's okay, what kind of house do you want? How many bedrooms do you need? They're going to ask you that. What about a living room? You want a living room and a den? Do you want a kitchen separate from the living room? You want an open concept? See, today, in the last 10, 15, 20 years maybe, but I know definitely in the last 10 or 15 years, they've gone to this open concept. So you have the kitchen that kind of opens up into the living room. So it's all kind of this one big area, right? Whereas before you had a kitchen, and then you kind of went out of the kitchen and over a little bit, and then you might have had a dining room, and then you had the living room over here. And so people have kind of moved, they've moved away from that concept in building houses, and they want it more open, how things will flow around. And so that's where they come into design. So it's like, okay, meeting with the architect, you're saying, okay, well, the architect's going to say, well, how many bedrooms? How do you want your living room to look? How big do you want your bedrooms? Do you want your master bedroom to be on this side of the house and all the other bedrooms over here? So if you got 3 bedrooms, you could have 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms over here. You've got living space, kitchen. Then you got a master suite back here, up here, or whatever, separate from over here. Um, I know when I was growing up, the house that we lived in, you had 3 bedrooms, and there was a bedroom, bedroom, and bedroom. So my mom and dad's bedroom was here. There was a bath, and then a bathroom, and there's a bedroom here and a bedroom here, in the hallway and living room, and then there was a big living room here, a wall, and then there's a little doorway, and it went into the kitchen, and there was a dining room. And that dining room, uh, we converted it into a den, because that was it. We didn't have a den, and so instead of just gathering in the living room, because that living room space was my mom's show and tell space, I'll call it. She liked to, okay, people come into the living room and sit, because it was a little nicer furniture and that kind of thing. And we as kids, ain't no way you're gonna be in there and play and roughhouse and everything. So they converted that dining room into a den. And then later the garage, the single car garage, was closed in, and my grandfather's brick mason did all the brickwork, and they built a den, and so they had really a dining room. So the whole point here is just what's the composition? The composition of the house is laying that out and deciding what you want in that house, right? So, how many bedrooms, how many baths, all that kind of stuff, where are they going to go? And you have to make sure it's conducive to the flow, right? So, are people going to be able to flow through the house to get to where they need to go, or is it going to be so cumbersome? You're not going to have the front door way over here in the corner, and you got to go down this long hall and take a left and go this way, and then go way over here to the kitchen, then come out, and then your dining room's way over here, and you come out of that and you go way over here, and here's your living room, and then so you can't really, it doesn't have a good flow. That's gonna hurt you when it's and just living in something like that's going to be a challenge. And then two, architecturally and structurally it's a challenge, but it's also aesthetic challenge, um, and that kind of thing, and just the flow of traffic and everything. And so when you think about your home, you think about the flow of traffic coming in and flowing through to get where they need to go. It should be very easy to get to one side of the house to the other very easily. And so when you're composing your painting, I'm just putting my drink down here and you can see it. Um, it and this is my 7 Brews Mocha Chiller. No endorsement for 7 Brews, but I got it today. But anyway, unless they want to sponsor me. But anyway, in composing your painting, you want to be able to take the viewer's eye through the painting, right? So what is the focal point? Okay, so you may have some like in this case, you may have some shrubs or tree, uh, things over here, and you can see how they kind of slant down this way. You've got water flow, banks coming up around this way, right? Okay. You've got a skyline or the horizon line here, and then you got clouds. And so really the focal point is going to be right in here. This is going to be the focal point. So you want the eye of the viewer to kind of lead in there. You don't want them kind of falling off the canvas somewhere. So the eye comes up the side here. The eye is going to come up the side here. You're going to have things that are kind of going to point down. You got this here that's kind of pointing down and leading the eye into this particular area here, which is your focal point. Okay, so that's the thing that you have to think about in just thinking about relating it to building a house, and that's the first step is just okay the composition. If you don't have a good composition, then your painting's probably going to suck, and uh, your your view is going to get disinterested because they don't know really what to focus on, and there's too many things going on. And if people come to your home and there's no good flow, they're going to get lost and what have you. And especially like if you go to sell that house and you're trying to show it and view it to people, it's like, how in the heck do I get to the living room or get to the kitchen or get to the master bedroom? Where in the heck is that? And that kind of thing. I mean, excuse me, and the whole thing that I'm looking at is just a 1-story, brick home or, a home. I mean, you could have bedrooms, upstairs and that kind of thing, but you still have to have that flow and you still have to have, we'll call it that composition. And so as you meet with the architect, he's going to say, okay, you need three bedrooms, you want 2 full baths, maybe you're going to do 3 full baths. I was in a home recently of an artist friend of mine, beautiful home, I mean, out at Lake Tobosoffke, and I was just overwhelmed. I mean, it was just a beautiful home, and they had downstairs 2 huge bedrooms were their children's bedrooms, and they each had a full bath. And there was a big bedroom over here, big bedroom over here. There was a big area in the middle. Each bedroom had its own bathroom and everything, and it was just kind of like a big family area in the middle, and a lot of glass here, windows and everything, and you could walk out to the pool and all that kind of stuff, or walk out to the pool, which is great, and I like that, and so you're talking with the architect, it's like, how many bedrooms, how many baths, all that kind of stuff, and so they'll put all that together, and it's like, okay, I've got the notes, and based off how big do you want the bedrooms to be, that kind of thing. So they start specking it out, and they'll come up with whatever the square footage is going to be for your house, and they'll give you a cost, okay, based on, if you want the bedrooms to be 15 foot by 15 foot, and each one have its own personal bath, and blah, 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 that's going to cost you more per square foot because now I got to put piping, plumbing, for both bedrooms and baths and all that kind of stuff. So what eventually happens is you get it down to, well, maybe the bedrooms are too big, and maybe we could do a Jack and Jill bathroom, one in between 2 bedrooms that people could share or whatever, and that gets your costs down. But you still have to lay out that foundation and that blueprint. And so once you get that blueprint, or talk and finalize it, that architect can then go and draw all that up. And now he's got it all laid out, and he can show it to you. Wow, look at this. Look at how the things flow. It will indicate where the doors are. It will indicate where the windows are going to be, any hallways, laundry, all that kind of stuff. So when you do an impremature, I like to think of it as that blueprint for you as an artist. You've got down where everything's supposed to go. Yes, it's in this one color, I'll say, different value, light or dark, but it's the same color being used all over to help sketch out for you the composition of the painting. And that way, when you go to paint, it's just a matter of saying, hey, I know that these areas got to be darker. I've got shapes over here for these trees and shrubs or whatever. Out here, it's almost like in this back in here, it's darker, it raises up some trees, hammock area, and that kind of thing, clouds, what have you. And when I sketched this out and did it, I actually have some clouds in there. And some artists like to do this. I didn't do it, but what they'll do is they'll shape the clouds. They'll have it either light or dark, depending on what the value is. And then when they put in their blue sky color, they'll work around that particular shape. I didn't do that here. I just covered it all because sometimes I like to just go in after the fact using my photo reference and start putting the paint on the canvas with the color. Okay, I like to just work from that. There's some artists, they already like the cloud shape. You can see it and they know where the cloud is. And sometimes what the, doing it this way, the way I'm doing it right now, it allows me to adjust. I don't have to stick to the plan if I don't want to. I do have my photo reference, but I could do something a little different if I wanted to. Okay, so it gives you flexibility to do that. Okay, so I wanted to kind of cover this with you a little bit, just kind of give you a background as to what this stuff is all about and why this painting looks the way it does. It's in the early stages, and if you want to, you could almost look at it as, okay, if you're going to build a house, that architect is going to do a floor plan. And that's just the floor plan. This is the floor plan for your painting, okay, where everything goes and how it's laid out. It's like a blueprint the architect gives you. But what the architect is going to do, you got to have a foundation. Now, you may be building on a slab, you may be building up on a block foundation, and that's fine. But this imprimatur is kind of your foundation. Now you can start, once you get this down and you've got everything laid out, because in your foundation, maybe it's built up 3 or 4 feet blocks, and if you've ever seen a construction site, you can kind of go in and walk around, when the blocks are up and they haven't put down any plywood or anything for the flooring first. You can kind of see how things are laid out, and that's what this does here. And then once you're done with that foundation, now it's time to start adding the flooring and starting sticking it up and all that kind of stuff and going from there. And that's what applying the paint is kind of the adding to that foundation and sticking it up and all that. You don't do a lot of the details in the house until after the major stuff are done, right? You got to have the foundation in, you got to have that, and then part of the flooring in, and then you start get plumbing in, okay? It's a lot easier to do that before you start putting walls up. Sometimes you will put some walls up because some of the plumbing has to have like pipes and tubes that go up for shower. It has to have something to clamp onto. So you may do some of your plumbing as it's being sticked up. And the same thing for electrical. It has to run through and be attached to 2x4s inside the walls. The wire does, and then here's an outlet box, and they'll install all that. Then they'll start coming in with sheetrock and all that kind of stuff, But you don't really put the paint and the final touches to it until toward the end. And that's the same thing with doing details and stuff. That's one of the last things that you do. One of the things that I learned from John McDonald in a tutorial that I have of his is he uses a triangle deal here, and see if I can step over here and get this. I don't know if I can take this off or not, but anyway, I can't get to it. It's just a little triangle, okay? And the there's a big piece down at the bottom of the base of that triangle, and it says composition. And on top of that, think of this as going up, okay? Top of that are your values, your lights and darks. On top of that, the next level, 3, is your colors and the relationships. The fourth, which is smaller as you get up, are the edges. You know, you got some soft edges. And then the final piece up there are details. So you don't want to start doing details if you haven't got all this other stuff in place. And this is like, your composition is your foundation. Then you start sticking things up and building walls and blah, blah, blah. And then one of the last things you do is after it's all built, you're putting shingles on, you're hanging some gutters, you may be putting up some you know, some doors or something. It may be, you know, other little minor things, shutters. That's what I was trying to think of. I couldn't think of it. But anyway, that's a little bit about, you know, getting a good foundation in and a composition in and start applying paint and that kind of thing. So hopefully you've learned a little bit from that today. And let's just try to do a little painting. All right. So I don't want to drag this out too long, but right below the camera here, right down in here, I got a paper towel rack that I use and wipe my palette knife and everything. And I'm the type of guy, I like to mix my paint, you know, on my palette. And I know I'm going to be using a little bit of some pinkish color in my clouds. I'm just eyeballing it from my photo reference. And so I'm just going to get, this is just the white paint, just kind of mixing it in a little bit there. I'm just kind of looking at the photo reference, and just a reminder, you know, that it only takes a little bit of CAD red. A little bit goes a long way. And yeah, so I've got very little CAD red on the tip of that palette knife, and I'm just kind of mixing it in real good here. And I just used a very small amount, okay? And okay, all right. And I want the base of my clouds to be darker. I'm going to have some clouds like up through here. I'm going to have some right down in here, but I want the base to be a little darker. And I'm going to add just a little bit more red in there. That might be a little bit too much, but we'll see. We'll see once we get it up on the canvas there and start applying it. If we see that it's too light or too dark, we can always adjust that, right? So just because we put it on there doesn't mean, oh, got to go with that. We can always adjust that. And one of the things that you could do, I like that shade actually. I like that shade. Now, one of the things I have to think about too is my light source. Basically, it appears based off my photo reference that maybe a little bit of the light is coming kind of down this way. Okay, why? Because I got more shadows over here and over here, and of course I got the shadows down in there. So that means the light source is kind of back this direction coming across. Okay, so it's kind of back up this way, up high coming in. So that's why I have reflections here and dark in here. Okay. So that's something you have to take in consideration. And then, you know, I got my clouds. I'm going to have some dark. One of the clouds that I have that I'm using on this particular photo reference of a painting, it's got a cloud, some clouds over here, and they have some dark grayish, purplish colors in the base and everything. It's almost like maybe some rain clouds, storm clouds are starting to move into the area. But for the most part, you got a lot of little puffy wisp of clouds coming across, and especially like down in here too, which I like. And I'm just going to kind of step over here just a second, because one of the things I want to do is I want to come over to my photo reference, and on my additional monitor that I have that you can barely see it, it's like right here. It's kind of out of the picture, But I have a monitor set up to where I've got my photo reference on it. And so what I did is I just expanded the photo a little bit so I can see it a little bit better. And there are some little bit more pinks and stuff like that. And it may have a touch of maybe a little bit of yellow in certain spots, things like that. But that's kind of way it looks. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I think I got that mixed pretty good. I'm just going to take a brush here. I like when I do clouds, I like to use a filbert brush. I like the rounded top and everything, and I can kind of add the paint in there. Sometimes people will use, they'll use a fan brush to do that. Kind of come in, wisp it in, and everything. You can do that. You just kind of work the tip of your fan brush, load it up with your paint, start kind of wisping it in, which I could do, which I may do. I may use a fan brush. This one, I don't know if it's too big. What I want to do, yeah, I'm going to use a smaller little fan brush. Let me see how that does. But I'm just going to start with it. I'm going to load some paint up on it. I mean, if I don't like using the fan brush, I may use something else. One of the things now, what I'm doing right now is I'm testing this paint, and I can feel that this paint is a little bit on the thick side, and it's probably because it was left out on my palette and it was starting to dry. So what am I doing right now is I'm adding a little linseed oil. Okay, I got these little bottles here that I use, and I got linseed oil in there, and I'll put a couple drops out, and I'll mix it in with my paint. I've also got another one here that I've got it labeled OMS for odorless mineral spirits, and I'll use that. So what I've done is I've added just a little bit of linseed oil in there, and I can tell right now, boy, that's really helping to thin that paint out a little bit. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit more, because I want to get it a certain consistency, because I want it to kind of, as I apply it to the canvas, I don't want it to be gooped up or gumpy or anything like that, very thick. So I want to add a little bit to it there. So I'm just going to come in here now, and I'm just going to kind of experiment a little bit with this, and I'm just going to kind of start working a little bit with a little motion, and throwing these little clouds up in here. Now I've got those clouds there, and looking at it, I think it could be a little bit darker red, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit more red off my palette here. I've got a little bit there, as you can see. I'm just mixing it in just to get a little bit more pink in there. So I'm going to come in on top of that, which I just added. Okay. Yep. And I can see, and that's not too bad. I'm going to kind of thin this out just a little bit as I come across, like so. I'm just going to kind of come over here to the right a little bit. This little puffy, this little wispy look of a clouds coming across, I'm going to have a little break right here. Okay. That just kind of gives me a little foundation. I've kind of got it, where I want, kind of like where I want certain things to go. It's not too bad. So one of the things I think I'll do is I'm going to add just a little bit. I think I got I think this is a little lemon yellow on my palette right here, to be honest with you. Yeah, a little lemon yellow. And so just adding a little bit of that in there. Okay, like so, just at the bottom. And take some more of that and get some more white over here. I'm going to add a little bit more of the linseed oil because I can feel how it's really started to thicken up because it was left out on my palette overnight and it started to dry. And so I'm just kind of loosening up that paint. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to kind of come in here, putting in a little bit, and wisping it up a little bit like so. Which isn't too bad. So, and then I'm going to take my little paper towel because I really don't, I feel like I'm getting too much of the yellow paint in there. Okay. So I'm going to take some of that out. I'm just going to come in here with some white, and I've added just a little bit of pink to it here, so it's not just all white. Okay, just I wanted it to have a little bit of color to it, you know. Okay. So okay. I'm going to do that here as well at the top because I want the kind of bringing that out a little bit more over to the edge and everything, just kind of fading that out, as you can probably see a little bit, you know, just take a little bit of the paint that's on the brush and just kind of, you know, kind of blending it out, just kind of really thin right there to make it just so it shows, you know, it's a thin little layer of clouds up there in the sky. Add that over there a little bit like that. So that's not too bad. I mean, it's a little different from the actual photo reference, which is okay. So one of the things I'll do is I'll take a little bit of that pink that I had earlier, and now I'm just going to come in here, down here at the bottom, and I'm just going to really just kind of just working in some low, thin clouds, okay? Fluffy stuff just there on the horizon a little bit. Just working it around with this fan brush. I normally don't use the fan brush, so this is kind of an experiment with me today. And this is all about learning. This is a learning painting. This is like I said, this is nothing I'm gonna sell or anything like that. It's just something that I wanted to do to try to learn and experiment a little bit, and you know, try some things. And you have to do that every now and then. So try something a little different. You know, step back a little bit, look at it, see if you like that. I'm gonna get a little bit more of the pink or the red in there. I'm not seeing enough of that pink color in there. Add some more, and then I'm going to come in here And here I'm just kind of, you know, it's a lot of little clouds, little bit of fluffy stuff, you know, here and there, and just kind of putting a little bit of that in. Just what little paint I have on the brush, kind of coming across a little bit, you know, on the horizon, and adding a little bit more color to it. Okay, like so. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of come in here a little bit, and I'm gonna blend this out, soften this up at the bottom. It was just too much of a hard edge at the bottom. I didn't like it, and you can do that with this fan brush and everything. So I kind of am smoothing that out a little bit, kind of blending that in a little bit, and softening that up as I go along. Okay, so come across there a little bit, which really isn't too bad. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to kind of take this horizon area and just kind of work it across where it's not as hard edge. So I'm kind of smoothing out the hard edges. Okay, and yeah, I kind of like that a little bit. Okay, do the same. Now, one of the things you can do, I'm kind of doing that here too, and just taking that, blending that in a little bit more, some of that yellow color. I probably could have made more of a peachy color with the yellow and the red and white, make it a little peachy color. I think that would have looked good in the clouds, for sure. Okay, just experiment. And just one of the things I try to do is when I paint clouds is I just try to visualize clouds. You know, just thinking about, you know, what's going on with in the atmosphere, clouds. Um, all the moisture that's in the clouds, the different colors that are in the clouds. I took a plein air class workshop a year or so ago up in Eatonton, Georgia, and it was kind of neat. Had an artist that came in. I can't remember where she was from. She might have been from the Atlanta area. I can't remember. Anyway, she came in, and you know we were doing. It was an overcast day. It was kind of gray clouds and stuff, and you know I was working on the sky, and she says, "Look, think about the moisture that's in the sky. There all these little drops of moisture like prisms, and then you see different colors. They, you know, magnify different colors. I mean, you could see yellows and blues and purples and pinks, and you know, sometimes you can see a little purples or violets or teal or something like that. You know, so add some color. Add some color. All right, so I'm just going to come in here and just put some wispy little shapes up here toward the top, like this. Like I said, I'm just kind of thinking about what all's going on up here in the sky. You know, maybe there is a little storm brewing off to the right over here, and you know, some stuff coming in, and then too, it kind of breaks up a little bit the monotony of the richness of the blue, so it doesn't dominate your sky. Okay, and so, got a little bit too much right there. Don't be afraid to take your finger, wipe it off, smooth it out, that kind of thing. So there. All right. So we got some clouds in. Um, I'm gonna experiment with this just a little bit more. Just put down a little bit more color right through here, like that. Okay. I'll put in a plug for my podcast called Artist Stories of Middle Georgia. We just put out another broadcast or podcast episode last week, an interview with Rick Geyer. Rick is the creator, the mastermind behind Triangle Arts in downtown Macon, Georgia. This is the fourth art incubator, you can call it that, that he's done. He did some up in Michigan area. He did one up in Atlanta, and he's come down here to Macon, and he's wanting to expand that a little bit too. But I had the pleasure of meeting with him and talking with him and learning more about that, what's going on there at Triangle Arts. And I encourage you to go out to Artist Stories of Middle Georgia on YouTube, Facebook, and check out the full interview. He's a very interesting person, loves the arts, working hard to promote art and artists in Macon area, which I'm trying to do the same thing. And that's the whole purpose of doing the podcast, is to let people know in the Middle Georgia area who these artists are and the beautiful art that they're creating, so that the community can continue to support them and purchase their artwork, and they have a place where they can go and create some beautiful pieces of art. So please check out that interview. But anyway, I'm stepping back a little bit, taking a look at the clouds. They're okay. I like them all right. I still experimenting here, guys. You probably see on my fan brush, I got a lot of pink on there. Oh yeah. Yeah, I like that a little better. Yeah, just experiment with that. You know, see what you find out what you like, what you don't like. Put a little bit more color in there. Which is good. Cool. All right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that. I like that color. It's a little bit of pink. I still had a little bit of the yellow pink on the fan brush, and when I was pressing down real hard, I got some of that in there. And see if I can get some right up here in this particular cloud. Oh yeah, yeah. Awesome. I like that. Yeah, that's turning out pretty good. But anyway, that's not too bad. I just wanted to do this little video real quick and kind of show you a little bit. You can see what I'm mixing. I used some titanium white. I used some cad red that I've got on the palette. Pulled it in. Remember, cad red is very, very strong. It's like some of your blues, your Prussian blue, your phthalo blues. A little bit goes a long, long way. So don't grab a whole lot of it and start mixing it in. Just grab a little bit. And sometimes I'll just put a little bit on the palette knife and just stick it off to the side and just pull in what I need. I did add a little bit of, actually this is a lemon yellow that I've got on my palette over here that was left over. I used that mixture and everything, and I did all that into the clouds. But anyway, just wanted to kind of put this out here for you to see a little bit. Hopefully I can do some more of these type of videos where you can see my palette and my easel at the same time, because I know I've seen some artists that don't do that. And I try to tell you a little bit about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it so you can learn from it. But like I said, just experiment with some of this stuff and, trial and error. And one thing too, please keep in mind that, and you'll see this if you're just starting off being an artist or a painter or whatever, not everything you paint is going to be a masterpiece. Not everything you paint is going to be something worthy of selling. Not everything you paint is going to be worthy of putting it into a gallery or, whatever. You may have to paint 10 paintings to get one or two that are just like, man, I knocked that one out of the park. It may take you 5 or 6, but you have to go. It's almost like in sales. If any of you have ever been in sales, you got to go through a lot of no's to get a yes. So not everybody's going to buy, and you're going to get a lot of doors slammed or people hanging up on you or a lot of no's. No, no, I don't want it. But eventually you're going to get a yes. Yeah, I'm interested. And I think it's kind of that way, excuse me, with painting. You're going to go through some no's. You're going to go through some paintings that are, man, that sucks. Or, yeah, I painted that, but what can I do better? Treat everything, guys, as a learning opportunity. Okay, you can learn from every one of those paintings. Just like this one, there's things I've already learned from it that I would do different the next time. Okay, um, so, you can learn every time you do an imprematura, you can learn from it. Maybe you left things too light, too dark, the shape wasn't quite right, whatever, but learn from it. Don't throw it away. File it away. Excuse me, file that painting away somewhere where you can pull it out 6 months, a year later and say, oh my gosh, look at the way I was painting back then, but look how far I've come. But anyway, thanks, guys, for tuning in today. Please like and subscribe. Leave me a comment below if there's something you'd like for me to cover. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.